पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर् द्यौः शान्तिर् दिशः शान्तिरवान्तर दिशा शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर् वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश् चन्द्रमा शान्तिर्नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौः शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amrutam Gamaya Aviravir Maheti Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Our topic today is coping with pain. One subject that we are all familiar with. None of us is a stranger to pain, and pain is not a stranger to us. And in our own ways, we try to cope with it all through our lives. About 25 years ago, I had an opportunity to do a little bit of research on this subject, and I have come back to this topic again and again over the years, because this is something that needs a lot of reflection and a lot of understanding, since it is something that we have to deal with it almost on a daily basis. If we ask which is the most common reason for seeing a doctor, the answer is pain. Which is the number one reason why people take medication? The answer is again pain. What disables or severely affects more people than even cancer and heart disease all over the world? The answer is again pain. What is it that has made people consider even suicide as an alternative? The answer is again pain. Albert Schweitzer once famously said that pain is a more terrible lord of mankind than even death himself. Pain is democratic. It makes no distinctions, irrespective of the other realities of life, the other things that distinguish us one from another. Pain makes no distinction. It comes to everyone. No one is free from it, and we learn about pain, interestingly enough, from our earliest nursery rhymes. So one rhyme that we are all familiar with: Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. And all of our lives really is nothing about trying to put the Humpty in our own life together again. The Buddha's sermon, the first noble truth that the Buddha taught in the Pali language, said Dukkham Arya Satyam, meaning, and the translated into English and elaborated, means this is the noble truth of sorrow. Birth is sorrow, age is sorrow, disease is sorrow, death is sorrow. Contact with the unpleasant is sorrow. Separation from the pleasant is sorrow. Every unfulfilled wish is sorrow. And the American poet Robert Penn Warren pens this line. This is what he wrote. Oh, it is real. It is the only real thing, pain. So let us name the truth like men. We are born to joy, that joy may become pain. We are bound to hope, that hope may become pain. We are born to love, that love may become pain. We are born to pain, that pain may become more pain. And from that inexhaustible superflux, we may give others pain as our prime definition. Fortunately, most pain that we experience in life is short-lived. The pain when your big toe stubs against a hard surface, headache, any number of pains that we have. Most of these are short-lived. And once it's over, we forget about it and go about our daily activities. So doctors generally tend to call it acute pain. But there is another type of pain which is not so short-lived, which goes on and on and on. No matter how often you try to get rid of it, it simply sticks. And that then is what is called chronic pain. Again, researchers have said that it's chronic pain that disables people more than even the dreaded disease like cancer and heart disease. So pain is really something that needs to be taken more seriously than any of the other illnesses. Until the 1980s, pain was a neglected subject, even in modern medicine. A 1983 survey, so it's a pretty old survey, but it showed that at that time, 17 standard textbooks on surgery, medicine, and cancer had only 54 pages out of 22,000 pages providing information on pain. So hardly anything. More than half the books did not discuss pain at all. Now at that time, so it's really not too long ago, even say 40 or 50 years ago, there were relatively few known facts about pain to discuss. Another problem modern medicine had at that time was it was undecided to which branch of medicine the research on pain really belonged. Did it belong to anesthesiology, neurology, or psychiatry? And that's why the research remained neglected and unfunded for a long time. Thankfully, that's no longer the case. Much work is being done on pain today. In ancient times, pain was attributed to evil influences. Egyptians thought in the early days, believed that pain was caused by angry gods and spirits of the dead. And so the only way to overcome pain in those days was to propitiate these beings. In India, a lot of people just attributed pain to just karma, and there really didn't seem much to do about it other than pray. By 16th century, it was discovered that pain could be dealt with opium. Earlier, it was thought that the heart was the locus of our pain. But Greek philosophers, and specifically Plato and Democritus, concluded that it was not the heart, but the brain which perceived the pain. And that was the right conclusion, but even at that time, the details about it remained quite unknown. Now, the recent pain research, and I'm sure when I say recent, it's still my information is still a little bit dated, so some of you probably may have more up-to-date information on it. But some of the basic facts about pain are this, that what exactly happens when a big toe collides with a large solid object? The pain message originates at the point of contact, beginning with the release of a few potent chemicals that are normally stored in and around all the nerve endings. Among these chemicals are, there are several names. Most of them don't make any sense to me, and I would imagine wouldn't make any sense to you. But one of the chemicals was a mysterious thing called, they just called it P in those early days, meaning that was something they didn't know what, but that P stood for pain. Now these chemicals sensitize the nerve endings and help transmit the pain message as an electrochemical message, electrochemical impulse from the injured region to the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. And from the spinal cord then, it is relayed as a chemical message to the brain, where the sensation first becomes conscious. So only then we really become aware of the pain. So before that, this is the way the pain message gets conveyed. And it's that time that the intensity and the location of the pain becomes known. Now, it was also discovered that only a limited amount of information about pain can pass through these nerves. The nerves were capable of processing this data, only limited amount of data at a given time. And so when too much information passed, many of the nerves just kind of stopped that flow of information. So that became known as the gate control theory. And then that is often described to show why massaging or patting a sore area gives some relief. In other words, if there is any other information which is more powerful than this pain information, then that information will get precedence over the pain information. So this gate control theory is what explains why sometimes we may not feel the pain from a very obvious source when we are engaged in an activity which is more engrossing. So sometimes you will see when you are busy reading a book or watching a movie, which is, you're so deeply engrossed in it, you may not even be aware that of a mosquito bite. But if the movie is not so interesting, then every little pain. It's like when you're listening to a lecture. Sometimes our seats are fairly comfortable, but sometimes the seats may not be so comfortable. But if you're so engrossed in a lecture, you may not realize that discomfort at all. But if the lecture is boring, every little pain will distract us. So by seeing your reactions, I know how much of my lecture is boring. One example is given and oftentimes the soccer player, for instance, who's so absorbed in the play that the player may not notice until the game is over that perhaps a shoulder is dislocated or the ankle is swollen. Because at that time, just the excitement of the game, you're so engrossed into the game that some of this pain you may not notice while playing. That's explained through this pain gate theory. In 1975, scientists discovered that that mysterious chemical I just named called P earlier, which the scientists called simply P. It's around 1975 they discovered what that chemical might be. And those powerful pain-blocking chemicals, they became known, of course, what most of us are familiar with as endomorphins. And these are that something which switched off the pain alarm in the body. So opiate drugs like morphine and heroin also have this capacity to activate the body's pain relief system. Now, pain is not simply physical. As I said, a lot of research is being done currently on pain, and the researchers admit that the experience of pain is a very, very complex experience. It involves emotions, previous experiences with pain, and what the pain means to us at any given time. Therefore, it's very difficult to pinpoint, because although so far we have discussed only the physiological aspects of pain, that where does this physiology end and the psychology of pain begins? Now, that takes us to a field where even modern medicine is groping, because it's easy to understand that when your big toe hits against a solid surface, there are the nerve endings, and there you feel the hurt and how those messages are transmitted, first to the spinal cord and then to the brain. But what about the pain we feel when we are insulted, when we are betrayed, when we are deserted? What about the pain when a dear one passes away or a feared one knocks at our door? Now, where does this kind of pain originate? There is nothing hitting against anything. Does it also follow the same route as the physiological plane? Now, modern medicine really has no satisfactory answer to this question. What the researchers have found that both physiological pain and psychological pain, both are interrelated. What pain signifies to a person makes a big difference to how it is perceived. For instance, fear, anxiety, stress, and the experience of disaster can make pain seem worse than it actually is. Sometimes the pain continues because the patient has something material or psychological to gain from it. Studies have shown that those people with pending lawsuits seeking compensation for injuries rarely get better until the suit is settled. Pain may sometimes make a mysterious appearance when someone wants to avoid certain obligations or duties. In one seminary, every member of that, every monastic novitiate, novices had to undergo a 2-month duty in the kitchen, in the dining hall. Now, among all the duties these young novices had, this kitchen and dining hall duty was the most severe one, especially because you needed to lift this heavy utensils and serve food. And so in one seminary it was discovered, invariably, when someone's duty came, for that dining hall duty appeared, many people developed backaches. And when that period of duty was over, they mysteriously became well. Now, they were not pretending. The pain that they experienced was very real, but it was also associated with their distaste and a desire to avoid that kind of duty. So it's pain, as you can see, it's pretty complex. It's not simply physical. What we see is that the mind plays a very powerful role in the experience of pain that we have. On the other hand, it would be a big mistake to think that every pain is psychological. Every pain is not psychological. To distinguish between physiological pain and psychological pain is not always easy. And if we are lucky to fall into the hands of a doctor who can identify which is physiological pain, which is psychological pain, then it's good. Otherwise, the patient can be confused. You go to a doctor and the doctor says, no, this is psychological. And you go to the doctor says, go check your head. And you go to a psychiatrist and says, no, everything is fine, it's something physiological. And you kind of go back and forth. This is the kind of, not exactly dealing with pain, but a similar kind of dilemma can come in other spheres as well. About a couple of years ago, I had a discussion and meeting with the Harvard Health Services, for instance. The chaplains and the religious professionals who are on the campus are there to help students and people on the campus with their spiritual and religious difficulties and problems. And so how do we distinguish when someone comes with need for help, either to the health services on a campus or to the chaplains, whether it's a religious issue or it's a psychological issue, whether it's a spiritual problem or it's a psychological problem? Again, similar kind of, it's a very thin line. Sometimes we ourselves may not be able to identify what kind of a problem we have. And continuing with that instance that I mentioned, sometimes we might think it's a spiritual problem, but it could be a psychological one. Or we might think it's psychological, but it could be spiritual. In the same way, the pain that we experience, how much of that pain is physiological, how much of it is psychological, it's not always easy to know that. And when that kind of a confusion occurs, when we are not sure, then oftentimes people turn to some alternative methods, alternative ways of dealing with it. And some of these other remedies have been found useful, whether it's chiropractic or exercise, whirlpool, massage. Some people have been benefited by that. Surgery has helped in some cases, and also music therapy. Now, different methods of relieving pain have been tried all over the world. And why a particular method should work in one case and not in another case, really no one really knows. And that's the mysterious part. Pain researchers realize that ultimately, every one of us will have to look within to our own innate mental power to deal with pain. Dr. John Bonica, founder of the International Society for the Study of Pain, and is a world-renowned leader in pain research. He says, "I don't think it takes too much scientific license to say that we will discover mental activities that can produce specific analgesia." And he said this way back in the 1980s. In 10 or 15 years, perhaps, we can begin to teach people to control their own pain. Now, what sort of mental activities Dr. Bonica had in mind is not very clear, but he is reported to have referred to a form of self-hypnosis long used in India to conquer pain. Now, that's Dr. Bonica's a little bit of a topsy-turvy in understanding, because it's not too difficult to realize that he most probably was referring to what we study here fairly regularly in Vedanta. What Bonica calls a self-hypnosis is really just the opposite. Once someone asked Swami Vivekananda that when we say, well, the self is, you are the self, you are the Atman, and the Atman is infinite, free from pain, free, pure, are we not trying to hypnotize ourselves? Because this understanding of the self is so different, so contrary to our present experience. So we experience pain, we feel vulnerable, we feel we are plagued by our mortality, and then we are told, no, you're not mortal, you are free, you are immortal. Are we not trying to hypnotize ourselves with that? And Swami Vivekananda's answer to that was, no, we are already hypnotized. So the Vedanta says is that our present experience is really is a result of hypnosis. That we have begun to so strongly believe on our present identity that when what is our true identity according to Vedanta is pointed out to us, that appears like some kind of an exotic way of dealing with it. And so you can kind of understand based on what we have discussed time and again here, how Vedanta would deal with this problem of pain. The reason is this. While there are several remedies available to deal with pain, both physiological and psychological, none of those remedies are able to relieve pain forever. Sure, some of them work like magic, but we know that they come again, and then we have to deal with it again. So one of the dangers that we can fall to, that we can become so dependent on external help, whether it's medication or anything, something else, that we are never able to keep pain away forever. One way would be to saying, well, it can never happen, that it's there, all that we can do is deal with it every time it comes in. What Vedanta proposes is to give us a method of being free from pain forever. And by ever is, because Vedanta's timeline is much bigger than what most of us deal with. That is, when we speak about future, it's not about until the time we die, because our existence is larger than this interval between birth and death. So in future would mean that every time we appear wherever on this as living beings and are encased in some body and some mind, we will never be free from pain because of those limitations. So what Vedanta proposes to do is to find a way as a freedom from pain forever. And when we begin to think about it in this way, it suddenly appears to be so simple, the way, so that we begin to wonder why we didn't even think about it before. Because it's just pure common sense in some ways. It's like this. Think about all the problems you have had. Think about all the kinds of pain you have had. And one thing is very obvious, that all of the pain that we have had has either affected us physically, physiologically, affected our body, or affected our mind. And we know that body and mind are connected because a lot of times when the body is not doing well, and if that state of not doing well continues for a sustained amount of time, the mind is affected by it. Or if the mind is not doing well for a long time, it also tells on our physical health. So body and mind are connected, and all of our pain is either related with the body and with the mind. Also, from our present experience, we know that when we are disconnected, even if temporarily, from our body and mind, we are free from that pain. It's like this. Let's say I have a severe headache. And when you have a severe headache, it might be difficult to fall asleep. But if you are really at some point, how long can you stay without sleep? At some point, sheer exhaustion, if nothing else, will put you to sleep. Well, you will go to sleep. When we are asleep, and as long as we are asleep, we are not going to feel the headache. The body is still there, the body hasn't disappeared, but temporarily, as long as you're asleep, you are disconnected from the body. So the body's pain continues, but because you are disconnected from the body, as long as you're asleep, you don't feel the pain. Same thing with regard to the mind. Depending on the kind of dream we have, again, it's not that all dreams are wonderful. It's not that all dreams are nightmares. Our dreams are as much a mixed fare as our daily life is. Some of the dreams are great, bring us great joy. Some of the dreams bring us great pain. Even the pain that we experience in a painful dreams, that pain is different from, or can be different from the pain we experienced in our waking state. So our dream self's mind may bring about a different kind of pain, but the waking pain may not necessarily show itself in the dream pain. Then, in that small period of time in a 24-hour cycle where every one of us go, called that deep sleep, when we are not even dreaming, that is the time when we are disconnected from both body and mind. Again, the body and mind don't disappear, but they are there, but we are not connected with it. And because we are not connected with it, the pain and problems connected with them do not affect us. So in state of deep sleep, again, no matter what age group we belong to, no matter what other distinctions we may have, in a state of deep sleep, everyone, and not just human beings, every living creature, even cats and dogs, everyone is experiencing that deep bliss because you are free from the limitations, the problems, the pain associated with the body and mind. And of course, as soon as we wake up in the morning, they come back again because we are again connected with the body and mind, which itself is defective. What Vedanta points out is this, that we cannot separate pain from the body. We cannot separate pain from the mind permanently. No one can do it. We can do it temporarily, but not permanently. So the wise alternative that we have is that if we cannot separate pain from the body, we cannot separate pain from the mind, one thing we can do is we can separate ourselves from the body and mind. Why remain connected with this defective product? Now, does this separation mean that we have to die? No, because in fact, death doesn't mean that you are free from the body and mind. First of all, death as we normally understand it is not freedom from the mind at all. The mind that we have now is the mind that we have had in all of our past lives. We don't get a fresh mind in every birth. The mind is the repository of all the impressions, the samskaras, the experiences. So everything is there. So and the mind is carried over from one life to another. So first of all, the mind is not destroyed. Even the body, even if we get a new body, a different body in a different birth, that body is as much limited, as much defective as the present body is. It will be new, but it's not, in its essential characteristics, it's not different from this one. And therefore, simply elimination or disconnecting ourselves from body and mind does not mean death. In fact, it is something that brings us joy right now. Think about it this way. When you are engrossed reading in a good novel, or you're watching some great movie or a television program, or playing some computer game, anything that takes your whole being and makes you for that time less aware or almost not aware of your body and mind, that's a wonderful time. The pain associated with the body and mind you forget. So you don't have to be asleep to do that. You can be even engaged in some activity to do that. And so what Vedanta encourages us to do is to say, look deeply within and find whether your identity with the body, your identity with the mind, is it intrinsic to you? And one thing is obvious, it's not really intrinsic, because if it were, we would never be able to switch it off even for a short time during the sleep or during dream. So it's not really integral to our existence, because if something is integral, we can never be without it. And so if we can separate ourselves or disidentify ourselves from the body and mind in sleep, in dream, which really occurs in a natural course of our life. We don't really have to do a lot of spiritual struggle for that. Can we do it consciously? And that is really what Vedantic spiritual practice is all about. That consciously, when I'm awake, can I look deeply and say, sure, you're not denying the body, you're not denying the mind, you're not denying your experience. You acknowledge everything as they are. But then ask yourself, is this really who I am? And those who have done this kind of research, this is as much a research as the research that I referred to at the beginning. But this is the research in the internal world. The laboratory is inside. It needs a special kind of training. Well, all kind of research needs training. If there is, you need a training to go out into a physics or a chemistry laboratory and work. You need a different kind of training to go inside. And here the laboratory is one's own mind, the deeper layers of our mind. The body is complex enough, but the mind that we have is even more complex, a lot more complex than the body. To go within and do research there and then discover that sure, the body and mind are there, but they are just layers. That the real me is within. And that real me is free from all problems, free from all pain. And once I discover that, I have the right technology then to deal with pain. That doesn't mean I won't feel pain. What it does mean is that I will have the freedom to dissociate from that pain whenever I want. Now these great enlightened ones, today the ones that we adore and worship and recognize as incarnations, as saviors, as prophets, sure, they had a body, they had a mind. We also saw that they suffered, and they suffered also looking at the suffering of other people. Now they were not pretending. The suffering they felt and looking at other people's suffering, the help they gave, came out of a real concern, a real compassion. But every one of them had that freedom that at a moment's notice, they could withdraw their being from the body and mind. And that is something that should become a part of our spiritual practice. In fact, that's really, although sometimes the goal of spiritual life may be spelled out in terms of whether you call it salvation or nirvana or moksha, you may have these different terms. But what the bottom line is this: whichever way theologically that goal of life is explained, what we really want is, I don't want pain. And if there is a way of getting rid of pain forever, if there is a way to feel fulfilled and happy and contented forever, that's what I want. And you can call this and cover it with concepts and ideas and give different names to it as the goal, but really that's what we want. And Vedanta has this method that is put before us, that we have the technology, we have the capacity, we have the knowledge of how to become free. Now, just having the knowledge doesn't mean that we will automatically become free unless we do something about it. Vivekananda has that great poem, the Song of the Sannyasin. He says, "Thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on." So here is the pain, and I know all that I need to do is let go of that rope which is dragging me. So there's no point in clinging to that rope and saying, "Oh, I experience so much pain." Just let go. And we know from our own, it's so much more easier to say let go. But we know from our own personal experience how difficult it is to let go of even mundane things, what to speak of things that are so very dear to our heart. Now, having said all this, it might appear as if pain is something to be dreaded. Pain is an enemy. Actually, no. Pain is actually, or can be, in fact, a blessing. I said that one way of understanding the goal of life is being completely free from pain. And we might therefore think that being free from pain is the most wonderful thing that can happen to us. In the ultimate sense, yes, but not quite now. There are some genetic disorders, extremely rare cases, where people become completely insensitive to pain. And that might seem like, well, what could be better than it? They need not do any spiritual practice. They are already free from pain. But the results are really terrible. Being free from pain due to a genetic defect is not a blessing. It really could be a curse. What happened to these unfortunate people, what can happen and what has happened to those rare few who had this disorder, is that their fingers were either crushed or burnt because they did not pull their hand away from things that were hot or dangerous. You wouldn't even know if your big toe hits against a wall or something. And when there is pain right now, we know, but we wouldn't even know. The bones of such people, the bones and joints were deformed because they pounded them too hard when they walked or ran. Their knees had ulcerated because in their childhood they had crawled over sharp objects that they could not feel. Such was the insensitivity that were they to break a bone or dislocate a hip, they wouldn't feel enough to cry out for help. So immunity from pain is not really a blessing. So it's possible, and in fact it's necessary, to see pain as a warning signal. Just like we have smoke detectors. It starts making sound, and then it makes us know something is wrong somewhere. So pain is actually a blessing. So whenever we feel pain in the body, whenever we feel pain in the mind, our body, our mind are trying to tell us something, and we must listen to them carefully. Because ignoring those pain signals from the body or mind is not going to help. So pain is a friend because it warns us in advance that something needs attention. Now, if we ignore that signal, and then it can become an enemy. Then it can debilitate our life. It can take away the quality of our life. It can really make life a hell. But if we heed that signal, then it's in fact doing what a good friend does. So what I have said up to this point does not mean that we should not take help of modern medicine for help. It's certainly helpful. It does not also mean that the Vedantic method can substitute for all other methods of relieving pain. The reason is simply this, that when there is an excruciating pain, you wouldn't have even the privilege to think about the higher things. Sometimes when we are in extreme pain, we are not able to think of anything at that moment. And so medicine does help. Even these alternative therapies do help. And we must by all means take help of them. recognizing the limitations of all these therapies. So by all means, we can take help of these, recognize that they are limited, but once the pain is brought into a kind of a manageable limits, if we cannot eliminate it altogether, then we need to look deeper into the causes. And it is then that the methods suggested by these great spiritual traditions become helpful. So we can take help of every method known to us to alleviate pain, see that those methods work for us, because as I said, right now it's not known why certain methods work for some people and why certain other methods don't. But we can try. Oftentimes it's just a trial and error method of what works for us. So follow any therapy that works for you, recognize its usefulness, recognize also its limitations. But ultimately, recognize that for a permanent solution to the problem of pain, there is only a spiritual solution. One of our very elderly Swamis was a disciple of Swami Brahmanandaji, used to say that ultimately there is only a spiritual solution to all the problems. But the word ultimately is important. So this is not to belittle or ignore the other solutions that we may have. So do whatever, as I sometimes say, do whatever works for you. But recognize that its limitations. See that it doesn't weaken you in any way, physically, mentally, emotionally, morally. But ultimately recognize that we need to go to the root cause of all the difficulties we have. And that is then to know our true nature. So some of these ideas may be helpful as we try to cope with pain in our own lives. Clearly, these are just a few ideas that I could share with you. I would encourage everyone to think about it deeply, and you might come up with newer or different insights based on your own experiences. And let's learn from the things that happen in our lives, both the wonderful things that happen in our lives and the painful things that happen in our lives. And let's become stronger so that we can eliminate pain from our lives permanently. Om Jananim Saratam Devi Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. Next Sunday, we will have Antar Yoga, as usual, a special program with music and readings by members, reflection, and soup for everyone. And by this time, all of you know, we'll have a birthday celebration for everyone born in the month of July. So next week, all of you, and especially the July born in, I don't know if there is one word to put it, the July borns. You, and if you have friends and family members born in July, bring them specially. So we'll have a big celebration next week, next Sunday. On Wednesday, we will begin. We have concluded chapter 9 of the Gita last Wednesday. And this Wednesday, we will begin with chapter 10. That will be at 7:30. Tuesday and Saturday, Arati and meditation will continue as usual at 6 o'clock. So you're welcome for all of these programs. And we'll conclude now with a prayer on page 3 of your books. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Aura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto you.